I'm Denise, I'm the Scottish one.
And she's a non-fiction editor. And I'm Louise, the English one.
And she's a fiction editor. And together,
we're the Editing Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Editing Podcast.
Yes, hello. So this week we're going to be talking about writing and editing for the web. But why just have two editors talking about the subject when you can have three? Plus, it didn't feel complicated enough to do recordings with me in England and Denise in Scotland, so we decided to pull in an American too.
That's right. Welcome, Erin Brenner.
Hi, Erin.
Hi, Erin.
Hello, ladies.
So good to have you here. So, Erin, tell us a little bit about who you are, where you are, and what you do.
Oh, well, where I am is in Haverhill, Massachusetts, which is about an hour north of Boston, and no one ever knows where it is, but it's a nice little city.
It's east. Sounds
It's
east.
East. Yes. Does that help?
It.
Does that help everybody?
Well, it helps me.
Coast.
It helps me.
East Coast.
Yeah, that makes me a New Englander, which
lovely.
I'm a very strong New Englander. I love where I am.
Isn't New England beautiful?
It is. It's gorgeous. I'm 20 minutes from the ocean. I'm an hour from the mountains. We don't have big farms. We have lots of small farms around us, but still lots of trees, lots of parkland. It's a really great
lovely.
place.
I bet it's not as wet as Glasgow.
No.
It sounds like Norfolk, only Norfolk in England, only probably drier and less windy.
I would think so.
Well, we'll just have to come and visit you, and then we'll find out.
Yes, please do.
So tell us about your business.
So I run Right Touch Editing. I launched it back in 2005, at least part-time, and I went full-time in 2010, so I'm coming up on a decade. At this point, I run it as an editorial agency, so I offer writing and editing and corporate communications training, but I use subcontractors as often as I can to try and grow the business and give other editors some work, which I love to do.
And also, I suppose it means that certain people have different specialisms in terms of corporate comms, so that you can pick from that pool of talent that you've got access to and make sure that your clients get the right people on the case.
Absolutely. It means I get to say yes more often, which I really like doing. And that's why I branched out that way, is because I got really tired of saying no.
Yeah. It's a thing, isn't it? It's a thing, especially some of the writers listening might not realise that the whole scheduling thing around editing is tricky, isn't it? Because there's only so much you can only scale so far.
Right. There are only so many hours in the day, and no matter how you bill your clients, you are selling your time, which is something I really emphasize when I speak to other editors. And there's a lot we can do with efficiency and good planning, but there's a limit. There's an upper limit to that.
Yeah.
And I've got more than a couple of clients who will say, well, I have this project. Can you do it by tomorrow? Can you do it in the next couple of hours? So I like to be able to say yes. And so if it's not me, then it's one of my teammates. It's about knowing who's available and being able to plug the right person into the right slot. And I really do enjoy doing that.
And you speak as well, don't you? You do speaking at events?
I do. I've spoken at quite a few editing events now. I've spoken at SFEP a few times, and at ACES and EFA, and Editors Canada. Where else have I spoken? Magazines BC has a conference, and I've
so you're getting in touch more with potential clients there, are you, as well?
Exactly. These are magazine staff.
Yeah.
And so I'm talking to managers and writers and editors, and it's a great opportunity to get in front of potential clients and to get my message out to more people. I think
that's a really good way. I think that's something that editors should do more of. It's something that I think Louise and I have both done that as well, speaking outside our industry to areas of specialism that we're interested in to raise awareness of us and our services. And I think it's something that editors could do an awful lot more of, just to raise awareness of editing itself, apart from finding ourselves more clients. So I think
particularly because that's a really good point that you've both sort of like drawn us into there. We will talk about web editing for the web in a minute, but that is important because a lot of clients, especially in different industries, like the kind of clients that you work with, Denise, and the kind of clients that I specialize in, the kind of clients that Erin specializes in, are not necessarily using the same terminology. When they need help with their writing, they're not necessarily calling it the same thing. And so raising awareness is really important so that people know what they can get from us and how we can help them.
Yeah, it just helps to inform people, doesn't it? Yeah. So shall we actually get back on topic then, ladies?
We could do that.
This is so fun though.
Yeah, it is. I know. Yeah. So this week on the Editing Podcast, we're talking about writing and editing for the web, which is one of your specialisms, Erin, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah. So could you start off by telling us why working with web content is different from working with writing on the page?
Sure. At its base, it's about learning another writing style, so it's not hugely different. I think there's that misconception that web writing doesn't follow rules, that it's the wild west of publishing.
Yeah.
And I've been involved with web publishing for a while. About 20 years now, and
Right.
it's really not. The rigor that editors like is out there. So in that sense, it's not different. What's different is knowing some of the tasks that go with web editing that I know we're going to get into, like SEO. It's also about knowing how the web is read, and that's
Yeah.
really the big difference. Is we're all really good at reading the printed page, right? We've got the model down, white paper, black ink, right? But on the web, um, reading is really difficult. We have this light shining into our eyes. Uh, People don't always follow the best layout. So you might get a dark screen with light text. I see that a lot lately, and I don't know why. I find it really hard to read. And
Yeah,
so
I agree.
reading online is really slow. And it tires our eyes out. And I think that's something editors, when you stop to think about it, is something we know a lot.
Yeah,
We know very well.
definitely. Working on screen a lot. And also thinking about that, the way sometimes when people are reading web content, they're not always in the best environment so you've not just got the light coming from the screen, but you might have poor lighting behind you or to your side, and that can affect the way you engage with it as well. So I guess we need to be editors need to, and clients need to be thinking about that.
Right. And, maybe you're reading it on a big monitor, or maybe you're reading it on a little itty bitty mobile screen. But there's also so much on the web. When you're looking at a printed piece, that's it, right?
Yeah.
There's nothing else to draw you away from it on the piece. But online, everything is the same distance apart, and that's one click. So
It's just a rabbit hole, isn't it? It really is.
it is. There's so much to distract us, and we'd much rather go play a game or look at Instagram or Facebook than whatever it was that brought us to the web in the first place. So what we tend to do because of these things is we tend to scan rather than read. So we will look for keywords, which is why keywords are so important, is because we're looking for the right words that tell us this is the right message. And we're spending most of our time on that first screen full of information, that what they call above the fold. And we're scanning. We're looking at headlines. We're looking at bullet lists. We're looking at bolded terms. We're scanning in a pattern until we know that what is there is what we're looking for. And if through the scan we get enough information, we're not going to bother with the rest of it. We're really not.
That's a good lesson, isn't it, then? Because so that for businesses who are self-editing, they need to be putting their key stuff at the top, is what you're saying.
Absolutely. So web writing style looks for the most important information in the top paragraphs, but it's also top loading your paragraph, which means that first line, that first sentence, your most important information should be there. In a sentence, you want to front load your information. The most important idea is at the front of that sentence.
Do you know what I'm going to do? When we get off this, I'm going to go and check my website.
But it's so true, because I find that whenever I edit for web copy or copy that's going to be read on screen, it's often that I'm deleting the first paragraph, or it's like throat clearing that people do in the sort of run up to giving their information. You need to get rid of all that, don't you? Because otherwise you've lost your reader before they've even begun.
Absolutely. It's one of the big points I make when I teach this stuff, is that, when we're in school, we're taught to write essays where you have an introduction, you tell people what you're going to tell them, then you tell them the thing, and then in your conclusion, you tell them what you told them. And you have to throw out most of that in web writing. You have to get rid of that throat clearing. You have to get rid of that introduction. You have to really, it's much more like fiction in that regard, where you open up page one of a novel and you want to be right in that world. You want to be engaged right away. You want an emotional connection. You want to know more. And web writing has to do the same thing. We have to grab people as soon as possible. And we have to write in a way that means they don't have to read every word to get your message, because they're not going to do it.
And are there any other patterns that we need to think about, Erin, when we're writing our web copy on the page? I mean, I know you said front loading or top loading, and that first part of the screen, but is there anything else we need to be looking at on that page?
So readers online scan in specific patterns, and the most common one is the F pattern, because something catches your eye, like an image or the headline, and then you will read a line of text, and that's the top bar on the F. And then you scan down the left, the left margin, reading the first few words of a sentence or a paragraph, until your eye latches onto another line, and you'll read left to right, maybe not as far as the right margin.
Right.
And then you go back to the left margin, and you're just scanning down the left, so that your eye has made an F pattern.
That's useful to know. It's quite interesting, because I've seen various things over the years about all these different letters, but that to me makes most sense, because especially if you live in the West and you're reading English, that's the way you're used to moving, left to right, so you're going to start there.
Right, exactly.
But that kind of fits in that it's almost like you're losing interest by the time you get to the bottom of that F. And what about on mobile? Do people behave differently with that?
So on mobiles, people will skip words if they can. I mean, they will not read if at all possible. If an image will tell them what they need to know, then they will skip the words entirely. I think a lot about, because I do this all the time. I go to Amazon on my phone to look for something. Oh, that picture is the something I want. I'm not going to read the description. I'm going to press the buy now button. And that's it. And that's what people will do, because it is so hard to read on that small screen.
Yeah.
So I suppose for businesses, it's getting away from this idea of having big blocks of text that are off-putting, and perhaps using infographics and visuals much more to convey their message and their information, because we all know how off-putting these big blocks of text can be, can't they?
Absolutely.
And also thinking about, it's worth anybody who's got a website checking what the mobile version of their website, because I know when I built my website, I built it on a large screen, and then my website host actually sort of converts that into a mobile friendly thing. But it's making sure that the way I've laid it out on the big screen, when that converts, that is actually working. Because that might not happen.
It doesn't always happen automatically, does it?
No, it doesn't happen nicely.
No, and it's and that's really more the technology end of it. As editors, we're usually just responsible for the words, but companies should be ensuring that no matter what device and no matter what platform a user is using, they can get at your website, because there's nothing more frustrating than wanting to get information and not being able to because of poor web design. And people will go elsewhere. They do.
And they can, can't they? They can go quickly.
And you really don't have very long either, do you, to grab their attention before they're off? We make these decisions really quickly, don't we?
Mm-hmm. It's just a couple of seconds, and then people are gone if they don't get what they need from you. So one thing that separates web editing from other kinds of editing, especially editing for print, is you need to be aware of SEO, of search engine optimization. Whether or not you have been tasked with creating some of the SEO elements, such as your metadata and your keywords, you want to know what your client's keywords are. You want to know what their audience is like, so that you can make sure those keywords are in the copy, but they're not overwhelming the copy. Because even though we're writing for people, and we must always, always write for people, we also have to write for the search engines. And the search engines have the same goal that the publishers do, which is to give readers the information they're looking for. So you have to deal with that kind of middle computer technology thing going on, and consider how search engines read your site. And they do come to your site, and they will look through to see, do these keywords seem to really be on your site? Do they answer the question that readers have? So if a reader goes to Google and plugs in cheap flights, and your website, you have a page talking about how to find cheap flights, you certainly have to use that phrase, cheap flights, but you want to give them enough information for the reader to be able to do something, and your search engine's going to pick that up. They're much better these days with understanding context, with understanding synonyms, so you don't have to do what's called keyword stuffing.
I was just going to ask about that, about if you could explain what keyword stuffing is and why it's not a good thing.
So keyword stuffing is using a keyword over and over and over again on a page. As an editor, if you read it, you'd say, why didn't these people use a pronoun once in a while, or a synonym once in a while? I think editors are really good at sniffing this stuff out, because it's bad writing, right? To overuse a word. And you don't have to, in order for search engines to know that your page is about cheap flights or whatever.
I go to there's a recipe website that I really like, but I really wish somebody would tell them that they don't need to do this, because they do it all the time. So you'll find a recipe for low-fat chicken korma, and they'll say this low-fat chicken korma recipe is really great because it uses low-fat ingredients, and the low-fat chicken korma that you're eating is going to be much lower in fat than other standard chicken kormas. So how to make this low-fat chicken korma? And I mean, literally pages and pages and pages of this, and I find it
really
so annoying, really off-putting, and I have to scroll through pages of this to get to the recipe at the bottom, and I'm sure it must put loads of people off. And you know what, without all that, it's a fantastic website. They just don't need to do it, and I don't think people, certainly some people, don't seem to have moved on from that approach, which is such a shame, really.
So that's a really good point, though, that Erin's made, isn't it? That the technology has become more sophisticated. The search engines, the algorithms have become more sophisticated, and so we can write well for the web. We can use keywords well.
There's such a thing as too much low-fat chicken korma, definitely.
I'm not sure about that, but okay.
So that was actually really useful, Erin, just thinking about the sort of technical aspects of writing web content. But can I ask you also, where do you think people would actually be creating their content, and why would they do it there, directly on their website or somewhere else? What do you think is the best or the norm for that?
It really depends. If you're starting a website from scratch, then most likely you're going to start writing copy in Word or another word processing program. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
that's where I prefer to work because we have all our lovely tools in
Oh, we
Word.
Oh,
do.
yes, yes, yes. We love our
And then to
tools.
have all the copy in one file is
Yeah.
helpful because then you can catch inconsistencies, and again, you can do things like go through all the subheads and be more efficient in your writing and editing.
Yeah.
But if you're just doing a couple of pages, or if you're doing blog posts or news stories for a website, then it's likely that your writer is working right in the website in the content management system.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, it may be something we're familiar with, like WordPress. It may be something homegrown, which you're afraid to look at.
Yes.
I have one client where I don't know where this CMS comes from, but it's just don't look at it cross-eyed because it will go down.
Oh, oh, that's so stressful.
Yeah.
It is, and it's why
Yeah.
I don't like working there. But if you're
Mhm.
doing, just blog posts or quick changes, that's probably where you will be working. And again, it will depend on the actual project, but there are times where if I'm still working on a lot of copy right in the CMS, I'm going to dump it into Word
Yeah.
and work on it there, and then copy it back.
Yeah.
Um,
That
just
makes
because I
sense.
like my tools, I like having a backup copy, and I don't
Yeah.
worry much about losing everything. Um, I
Yeah.
worked I worked in a website today. I worked on I proof 3 news stories a day for a website, and one of them, my last one today, I was working on it. I had gotten it done. I hadn't pressed the save button, and I closed the window.
Oh no.
I
Oh.
had
Oh,
to do everything. It didn't take
Oh.
that long, but no one wants
no,
to do the work.
no, no.
Oh, that's such a pain, isn't
Yeah,
it? Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. So that's why we like working in Word, because we can recover things usually
yeah.
as
Yes,
well,
yes.
can't we? Yeah.
We're doing a whole episode on this in season 3, I think, aren't we, Denise?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
why we recommend any writer uses Word in particular, but sort of more generally word processing software, but particularly Word. And it's exactly that issue. It's about using those efficiency tools and safety.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Backup.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Erin, at this stage, before uploading to CMS, what sort of things would somebody writing web copy be looking to check then? I'd imagine a lot of it's similar to any writing, but is there anything specific for the web that you would be looking for?
Well, certainly. I mean, and again, I like to emphasize the point that as a copy editor, you're always checking spelling and grammar and usage and style. These things don't change, and
Yeah.
Hmm.
um, we do this for web copy. But I'm also looking at the structure of the paragraphs. Are they dense paragraphs? Because I'll break them up and make them
Yep.
shorter so that we have more
Hmm.
white space on the page. And I'll look for the same thing for sentences. Are they overly long? Um, I don't like to see too many embedded clauses uh, in a sentence in web copy, so I'll pull them out and I'll simplify sentences.
That's a really good point, because I've noticed, even when I'm checking my own website, that copy that even that where I think the sentences are quite lean on my site on the bigger screen, as soon as you hit mobile, you're looking at walls of text. And so
Yeah.
the
Right.
rules that you apply if you're writing a nice A4 or US letter size piece of text, sort of essay style, where longer paragraphs would work, or if you were reading a journal article or something like that, that doesn't work on a website.
Right.
It just looks overwhelming.
Hmm.
Mm.
It really does. And so those are things I look at particularly.
Mm.
Yeah, I just wanted to pick up on a point that Louise mentioned there about even though she felt her writing was lean, that it still didn't convert well to mobile. And it's something I think some people might have trouble with when perhaps they're a personal brand or they're, a solo business owner and it is just them. And they like to write in a quite a personable,
Mm.
conversational tone, which can itself be quite, quite relaxed, quite circuitous, and quite long sentences with embedded clauses, or going off at tangents here and there. How do you deal with that? Because obviously you want to find a balance in something like that as well, don't you?
You do, and there's an argument that people will read more online when it's engaging, that they'll read longer copy. So, first and foremost, you have to make sure the copy is engaging. And then I might start pulling back parentheticals and
Mm-hmm.
we're off the topic. All right, let's get rid of that stuff. And can we simplify these sentences a little bit, or can we break some of the paragraphs up? And have long copy, have 1,000 words, have 1,500 words, but break up the paragraphs. Can we throw in some subheads?
Bullet
Make it more
points and stuff like
more
that. Yeah.
digestible sort of thing, really.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Okay.
So
Things
looks
like
do
that.
count. Looks do count online, don't they?
Yes, they
Not
do.
just your face.
That's right. So I think there's potentially quite a lot to talk about here, but I think it is worth going into what writers need to check once their content's actually posted online. So in addition to all that structural and grammatical
Mhm.
stuff, Erin, what else do we need to be thinking about? We talked a little bit about headings there, but there's other stuff too, isn't there?
There is. When you start to pull a page together, you'll have you might have images. So do they have captions? But they should always, whether they have captions or not, they should always have alt text, which is a description of what's in that image that screen readers will read out to, say, a visually impaired person,
Mhm.
to describe what's in that image. And you want to make sure you always put in your alt text for images and audio and video. They all give you the little options in the CMS to put in your alt text, so that those who are using screen readers for whatever reason are included in what's on the page, especially where web is so visual.
Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
doing so much. If you've got a visitor who doesn't get any of that information, how much are they missing from your page,
Mm.
right? How much of the message is gone? So that's really key to do. And
Do you have
it's,
any, sorry,
go
Erin, I
ahead.
didn't mean to interrupt you there. Do you have any specific do's and don'ts for how you write alt text? Because I think it's quite a neglected area that a lot of people miss out,
Mm.
perhaps because they're not sure about what level of detail to go in, or what they should or shouldn't be including in it. So do you have any particular guidelines for that?
Um, if it's an image just to pretty up the page,
Hmm.
it's okay to say it's a decorative image and leave it at that.
Oh,
Uh,
right.
Okay.
Okay.
if there's text in that image, you absolutely want to make sure that your alt text says that,
Hmm.
and to be as descriptive as possible within the whatever character count you get
Yeah,
in
yeah.
your alt text box. And sometimes it takes a little playing with to see how much space do you have, and
Hmm.
how much information do people need to get the message that's in that image.
Right. Okay,
That's where
thank you.
copywriting skills are really going to come in, isn't it? That sort of
Yes.
creating that kind of really sort of potentially quite rich but short descriptions.
Right.
So it's not just so much about editing, but about writing there.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
Absolutely.
that's really good. And what about links? Should we talk about links a bit? Because those are in.
Absolutely.
Mm.
So you have two kinds of links, right? You have your internal links. That means the link goes to another page on that website. Internal links are looked at very favorably by the search engines, because it
Mhm.
means you have stuff. You have more stuff to share with readers, but it's also good for keeping readers on your site, which
Mm.
is often the goal. How long can we keep readers on our site? How much can we get them invested in our site? If you're a blog, you want them to read more than one post. So, you know, leading them off to more content on your site is really valuable. Um, Outbound links, external links, these go to other sites. And this is where you want to be careful because you are essentially sharing their reputation. Whoever you link to, it's like hanging out with them in real life, right?
Yeah.
So if you're
Yeah.
quoting the New York Times, it's great to link to the New York Times. That the search engines will see that as a positive. Your readers will see that as a positive. But yeah, you want to think about who are you hanging out with? Who are
I've
you
got a
linking to?
great story about that, like a really good example
Okay.
of a negative example of that. A few years back, there was one of the British newspapers was doing a feature on essay writing mills and talking about the problems of plagiarism and there was a discussion around foreign language students seeking language assistance and how what the that kind of blurry line between assisting with grammar and
Hmm.
spelling and punctuation and how that might feed into actually helping them sort of colluding in content creation, which is for someone's doing a degree, that's not acceptable. So what the newspaper did though, and it wasn't some small little, it was a, I don't know whether I should mention it, but it was the Guardian. There, I've said it.
Right.
It was the Guardian.
Done it now.
Guardian, which is a massive, massive newspaper
Hmm.
in Britain, and they quoted a few editors, and they wouldn't put a link into my website. Do you know whose website they did link to? They linked to one of the essay writing mills.
Oh no.
Oh, that's awful.
Unbelievable. So they were criticizing these essay writing mills for basically helping students to cheat, and then
Hmm.
actually provided outbound links to these organizations websites. And I said to
Oh
them, who
God.
was in charge of this, you do realize what you've done there, don't you? And she just she just didn't get it. Is that there was such and I'm only mentioning this because if that can happen, I'm sure that wouldn't happen now. I mean, it wasn't that long ago, but it was a good few years ago.
Hmm.
But if that business is, you're absolutely right, Erin. Businesses, when we're linking to external content, when we link to them, we're endorsing them in a sense
Hmm.
Mm,
because
Absolutely.
yeah.
we're sending traffic their way. And so if you don't endorse what somebody's saying, you need to really think carefully about
Yeah.
whether you want to be putting valuable link juice in to send
Yeah, because an
to
SML having a backlink from the Guardian, I mean that's like gold dust,
I
really,
know,
isn't it? It's
right?
crazy,
It is.
Mary,
crazy.
they
Yeah,
might as well have just said we love you anyway. So great point, Erin. Thank you for making that. I think it's really, really important that any business or any writer with a website, any editor with a website, you
yeah,
need to be thinking about reputational links.
Hmm.
definitely. Yeah. And what about metadata, Erin? How carefully do you look at metadata? I'm thinking very carefully. But
Yes. So your metadata will be the title of the page, it'll be a description of the page, and it may include keywords, may include categories, depends on the CMS. And this website I worked on earlier today, they're hooked into like 2 or 3 different services that help send out their metadata to help
Mhm.
get readers in. And yeah, you want to make sure that the titles are always accurate. You want accuracy first because you have human readers who are taught not to trust links or websites.
Mhm.
So you want them to know what they're getting. But you also want it to be interesting enough to get them to actually click through, to
Yeah.
be not so much clickbait, but to be click worthy.
Yeah.
If I'm going to click through on something, it's got to be worthwhile. So I
Mhm.
tend to think of titles as, are they click worthy? Would I spend my time?
I really
Um,
like that. I like that term, click worthy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's sort of the positive side of clickbait,
Yeah.
isn't it? It's,
Yeah.
right,
yeah.
because you
Really,
Mhm.
really,
do need
really
people to
important.
click through.
Mhm. Mhm.
And your description should, it's like any good teaser, any good news story lead, right? You have to let people know what they're getting, so they have an idea of whether or not this page is going to answer their question, because this is the meta description is what ends up on your search engine result page. You get your title, you get that little description underneath the title. That is your meta description, and it should be engaging, it should be intriguing, but it should be accurate.
And I think you nailed it there, though, as well. You said it should answer the question, because ultimately we are creating content that solves problems, aren't you? I mean, whether you're selling something on a website or selling a service or providing information, or entertaining, whatever you're doing, you're solving a problem for somebody. You're cheering them up because they're miserable, or you're selling them a product that will help them do something better, or whatever,
Right. We always go online for a reason. There are various reasons we go online, but there's always a reason. And so a website's job is to fulfill that need, that desire.
Yeah, yeah. So there's a lot to think about beyond just the actual copy itself, with all these additional things. So what about quality control? So a lot of people self-edit their content. Do you think it's worth always bringing in fresh eyes to have a look at it and to edit or proofread, or are there only certain circumstances where you would think that would be necessary?
Well, as an editor,
Yeah, we're always going to say always, aren't we?
right. But I've published my own. I've had a website for years, and I've had other editors say, "Hey, I found an error on your site," and I never want someone to find an error on my site. Well, so to me, if it's worth sharing something, publishing something so anyone can see it, and if you are looking to do this because you're making money or you have a message to get out there, then making it the best it can be is really a good investment. I think it's always worthwhile.
I'm always surprised. I'm still surprised by the number of websites I see that this kind of goes back to something Denise was talking about earlier, but this idea that you go to all that trouble to build your website, and then you do see some business websites that are just so sloppy, and you think it is really off-putting, and that has made me possibly unfairly judge that business negatively. And it's they could have, by not investing compared to their overall capital flows, investing a relatively small amount in making sure that their message was really, really sharp. And it's a real shame, because there is evidence out there. I know I've seen studies. I can't quote any off the top of my head, but I have seen studies showing that how damaging having a poorly rendered website is.
It's true. I mean, we're told not to judge a book by its cover, but it's exactly what we do. It's our shortcut to whether or not we can trust somebody or we can trust a business. And yes, we will absolutely judge a company based on the quality of its website, and that will include its writing, it will include its graphics, it will include how long it takes the page to load, it will include whether I can get it on my phone or my laptop. All of these things are potential barriers to people trusting you, and it is so easy to go find somebody else.
Yeah. And we keep coming back to that, don't we? But it's so true. It's really important to ram this home, because if I go into the city and decide I'm going to do a bit of shopping, it might take me a bit of an effort to go from one big department store to another. It takes me milliseconds to do it on the web. So easy. Yeah. I can just bounce out. And so, yeah, really good point. So, Erin, thinking sort of further on from that issue, do you have any guidelines for how many passes you think web content needs prior to publication? I know we can edit published content, but I suppose is that fear that what will be the impact of that one thing that slips through?
Well, there's what we think should happen, the ideal, and there's what actually happens.
Yeah.
I'm totally in favor of having something copy edited, and then once it's put in the CMS, having it proofed. And I've worked with clients who do that, who are very scrupulous, and who care a lot about quality, and we get to do those 2 passes. But I've worked with so many more clients where it's 1 pass.
Yeah.
And it's, if I only get 1 pass, I hope they're giving me access to the CMS, because at least there I can look at the preview pages and see how things are rendering. I can click on links to make sure they're working, which is a huge deal. And I don't see it enough that if you're working with web copy and you're at a point of being ready to publish and it's in the CMS, make sure you look at the preview pages and click on each and every one of the link, because
Yeah.
it is so easy to
Mhm.
mistype something, to
Yeah.
have errant code in it, and make sure the link needs to work. It needs to go to the page you expected, and the page needs to actually be related to what readers were reading about.
Yeah.
It has
Yeah.
to be
Mm.
appropriate. And so you have to meet those three things. And so if I'm only getting one pass, I want to be able to click links. It's really
Yeah,
important
that's a
to
Yeah.
good
me.
point. That's a
Yeah,
really good
really good
point.
point,
Yeah.
because there's nothing more frustrating than ending up on an irrelevant page or a 404 page, which for
Yeah.
people who don't know what that is, a lot of listeners will, but some won't. That's the page you end up on when it's all gone wrong.
The
Yeah.
worst thing is when you go to a page that is no longer owned by the previous host and is
Mm.
now a porn site or
Oh
something
yeah, yeah,
else.
Gosh,
yeah,
yes.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
That happened a lot in the early days where, sites went up and they were killed immediately, and then somebody else took them over, and oh, you got an eyeful. Check
That's
your links.
that's not a good relational link, is it? No.
No,
And
no.
the other thing I would suggest as well is, make sure your link goes to the exact page of a website. I hate
Yeah.
being sent to the home page of a website and then I've got to find the page that they're talking about myself.
Mhm.
I want the link to go directly to the blog post or the service page or whatever that they want me to read. I don't want it to go to a generic home page that I have to navigate from. That
Yeah,
puts me
Right.
off completely.
Yeah,
yeah.
I agree. It should go to the closest source it can.
Mm, not just me being
And it is,
fussy.
and I
Nope.
think it is that trust issue again, because I
Hmm.
sometimes feel if I'm sent to something and I feel that I've been sort of manipulated into looking at content that I wasn't interested in, then that immediately makes me less trusting of the site. So whereas if somebody says, here's an article about low-fat chicken korma, back to that again, then I want to go to that recipe.
Hmm.
Yeah,
I want to go to that recipe. I don't want to go to a general cookery site, because
no.
that's just
Right.
manipulative.
Hmm.
Yeah. So Erin, can I ask you about fact checking and authenticity? Because one of the things I've noticed about some web content is that inexperienced writers can fall into this trap of making broad brush statements that serve to make themselves or their businesses more credible, but it's just a bunch of platitudes and truisms that sound good but can't possibly be substantiated. And I just wonder what your take was on this in terms of, when we're editing content to I guess I'm talking about that trust issue again.
And I've seen the same thing. You always want to put yourself in the best light, of course. If
Yeah.
you're online to promote yourself, you're going to put things in the best light, but you need to be factual. We've all w- grown up in this era of marketing and sales. It's a constant in our lives, and we have really good BS detectors.
Yeah.
So, um, and I think a good copy editor would do this in other places as well. Are we being factual? Do we have supporting evidence for statements we make? We should be as specific as we can in our advice to our writers when we're doing the editing. But we should help them be factual. We should help them understand when they should link to supporting evidence, and just help them write in a way that, yes, is promotional, but isn't a load of hooey.
Yeah.
Hmm.
There
Hmm.
was I remember a while back I was chatting with this guy. He goes on online by the name of the White Paper Guy, and I think his name's Gordon Graham, and he talks about when he's writing white papers, which he publishes online, on behalf of clients. There's several things that he looks for when he's creating his content, but two pieces of advice were to sort of think like a lawyer, but also like a journalist. And again, it's that stuff that you've talked about, Erin, about being engaging, so writing like you might expect a journalist to be, so trying to draw the audience in, but at the same time thinking of the, are you telling the truth? Are you building that trust? Are you thinking with a legal head on? Not because you think somebody's going to sue you, but because it's about representation, and so I think that's such a good issue to think about, that concept of just holding that notion of being truthful.
Absolutely.
And I think when we were talking a while back about this stuff, you were talking about failures and wins and honesty around that. Do you want to say a little bit more about that?
Well, actually, I think talking about past failures or difficulties does a lot to build trust. It brings out the human side. It's all linked to storytelling, isn't it? And being open and honest with people. And I think we can do that in a way that actually builds our credibility when we can admit to failures and how we've worked through them, than pretending that we're absolutely perfect, which is almost less credible, really, I think. I don't know what you feel about something like that.
Although I must admit, when I see people going on too much about their sort of like, you don't want it to be too woe is me.
No, oh, definitely not.
Right.
No.
That's another thing I think that I've
Mhm.
seen a lot of marketing style sort of approaches to, or marketing business approaches to getting attention with web content is by trying to get the sympathy vote almost.
The sympathy vote works in nonprofit.
Yeah.
So
Right.
if you're
Yeah.
raising funds for kids with cancer, then the sympathy vote works. It's telling that story of this child and always making it personable, an individual that people can connect with, and wanting to help them. You're
Mm.
appealing to people's better natures.
Mm.
But yeah, if you are there to promote yourself, and all you can do is talk about failures, is talk about the woe is me, people are going to be turned off by that. They're going to
Mhm.
see that we just feel uh, our defenses go up. We feel like there might be a scam behind it, or we feel that it's too much. It's uh, too much of an emotional connection. We need some distance from that. So you're looking for a balance. Um, it is good to share some past failures because it shows you as human.
Mm.
It means your readers, your audience can say, okay, I can connect to that. I can relate to that.
Mm.
But you want to show them a way out.
Yeah, solutions.
Yeah.
I made this mistake, and but here's how I overcame it, or here's where I am
Mm.
now, and it won't
Yeah.
Yeah.
always be that way. So it could be that way for you too.
Yeah.
Did either of you read Vanessa Plaister's blog post for the SFEP in the last week about?
I haven't read it yet. It's on my to-do list.
No.
It's terrific, and it's about exactly that. It's about a difficulty that she had with a client, and how she overcame it, basically. And it was a very, very difficult situation. I think we should put a link to it because I think it's really good. And she's very honest in it about her role in it, in perhaps not identifying red flags
Hmm.
earlier on. But then she goes into detail about how she worked through it and dealt with it in order to preserve her relationship with her
Mm.
project manager. And it's very,
Really?
very useful, and it's very good for other editors to see that, but also for writers to see that as well,
Hmm.
about where the relationship broke down a little bit, and how they moved through that. So I think that was where that sort of honesty really would have
Really works.
really worked, yeah, in
Hmm.
Mm.
recognizing her, how professional she was in dealing with it, actually.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm.
Oh, that sounds terrific.
Mm.
Do you think there's an order of play when it comes to editing web content, Erin?
I think there is, but it's up to the individual editor. It's always more efficient to chunk your work, to do like things at the same time. So it might be looking at the title and looking at the subheads first.
Hmm.
Um, you catch more errors that way. But I think it's going to be what you're most comfortable with, as
Okay.
long as you have a solid routine. And it could change from project to project. So I keep coming back to the client I worked for earlier today, but they have a very fussy CMS, and so I have a very specific order for reviewing the
Okay.
article and the
Hmm.
SEO,
Yeah.
so that I don't forget anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Checklist approach is really helpful, isn't
Checklist,
it? Yeah, yeah.
absolutely.
And on a related note to checklists, can we talk about style sheets? Because Louise and I use these all the time when we're working on non-web content. So how do they factor into web work? Similar principles, I'm assuming.
Absolutely similar
Hmm.
principles. And again, it's going to depend on the project.
Hmm.
So if your job is to copy edit the blog posts on a regular basis, you might have a running style sheet,
Hmm.
which I do for several clients, where it's based on the house style, and I'm adding to it on a regular basis. But it's only one sheet for the whole site.
Hmm.
Whereas if I'm going to work on a big project, I have some clients who publish what we call ebooks, which are generally long articles
Yeah.
Hmm.
that may be published as a PDF.
Hmm.
I kind of look at those as distinct projects, and styles might change between them. And so I'll have distinct style sheets for them, but I
Right.
always use a style sheet. Love
I think
them. Who
we
Yeah.
can
all
keep all
love
that
them.
information in their head?
Exactly,
No,
especially when you've
nobody.
got multiple clients, who have different requirements. It's just
This,
it's a no-brainer, really, isn't it?
yeah. This is kind of related to style. I'm thinking about audience. So Denise is a Scot, I'm English, you're American, and yet despite our national identities, we all work for clients from all over.
Mhm.
So web content's the same. The audience is global. How does that affect maybe some decisions you're making when when people are writing and editing for the web?
Well, it's going to depend on the website. You mentioned The Guardian earlier, that uses British English. You
Mm,
go to the New York Times, it uses American English.
uh,
So we're going to have different style sheets for those two sites. So it's really important to talk to your clients about their specific audience. While it's going to be accessible by everybody in the world, who are they aiming it at? In general, you're probably not always aiming it at every English speaker. You might be
no.
aiming it at North Americans, or people over in the UK or over in Australia, and you're gonna bring in style for those regional Englishes.
Mm. I mean, people are pretty good at I always think, I mean, I grew up on a diet of American TV. I think I'm pretty good at translating anything that's not
Hmm.
immediately obvious, or at least, learning through context what things might
Hmm.
be. So actually, although there are some things that I might come unstuck with, I don't know, soccer and football, I don't
Hmm.
have a problem with. I know if I hear an American talking about football, I think they're not talking about what I mean by football, but you know,
Mm.
there are.
It really does come down to knowing your audience, which a web publisher can get at with their web analytics. Who is reading their site? Where are they coming from? And then addressing their needs. Do you have when Laura Poole and I ran copy editing, we had editors from all over the world reading our site, but it was really primarily North American.
Yeah.
Um, uh,
Hmm.
right, editors coming to the site, and so we used American English, and only if an idiom or a reference would really be opaque
Yeah.
to those outside of North America, would we work to smooth it out, or to make it more universal. But
Yeah.
if you've got an audience that's really mixed, yeah, you're going to want to use a more global English. You're going to want to really think about your idioms, really think about your cultural references, and you're going to want to keep that style guide tight. You're going to want to
Mm,
follow it closely. You're going to want to um, really make some careful decisions about not just spelling, but grammar and usage, which can be really different between the different Englishes,
Yeah.
surprisingly so. But it does still come back to audience. It's really knowing who your audience is. And if most of your traffic is coming from one geographic area, then those are your main readers. Those are the ones you're probably going to build your style around.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And just thinking too about things like, when you mention place names, for example, like there's
Mm-hmm.
overlapping city names, that's important to be clear about those, isn't it? Like, do you mean which Boston do you mean? The one in Lincoln or the one near where you live? Well, nearish.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you really have to do that no matter who your audience is.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think you have to really be clear about that. Personally, I tend to lean on AP Stylebook because they have their Dateline entry. It's which cities in the US and globally need a state or our country after them.
Yeah.
Um,
I'll,
and
I'll I'll put a link to that in the show notes actually, Erin, the AP style, so that people can, if
mhm,
people want to mimic you, they can lean on that too.
absolutely, it's a very discrete list. If the city's on that list, it doesn't need a country or a state, and they don't update it very often. So they're usually spot on with that,
Good.
and I like to follow that.
Yeah, that's really
Hmm.
nice. Thank you.
Great. That's it's been really, really useful advice here.
Really useful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, yeah. So, Erin, where can people get in touch with you if they want your advice or help with their web editing or any other type of editing?
They can find me on my website. It's righttouchediting.com. That's RIGHT.
Mhm.
Or you can find me on LinkedIn or Facebook or Twitter. uh, I'm pretty much all over the place. And if you search for Erin Brenner, I inevitably come up. I've done a
That's
good
great.
job with
Thanks.
my social media.
Certainly
Excellent.
have.
That's what we like to hear. Yeah.
So let's turn to editing bites. So this is the regular part of the show where Denise and I offer a recommended tool or resource. So Denise, do you want to start? What have you got everyone this week?
So my bite this week is a book called They Ask, You Answer by Marcus Sheridan. And I think it's a must-have read for anyone who wants to write honest, transparent content on their website in order to create trust and build a great relationship with prospective clients. And I've been lucky enough to attend several workshops run by Marcus, and he is an incredible teacher, and the book is chock full of really useful advice for you.
Brilliant. I've heard you talk several times about him, so and the workshops you've done, so that's cracking. So I love a checklist. So my editing bite is gonna be Erin's free website style checklist. It's a thoroughly useful one-page PDF that you can use to remind you of all the things you need to check before you publish your written web content.
So that's all for this week. Thank you, first of all, so much to Erin for spending
Thank you,
some time
Erin.
with us.
Yeah,
Thanks
thank
for
you.
coming on with us.
Thank you for
And
having me.
it's been our pleasure. And thank you so much to our listeners for tuning in again to the Editing Podcast. You can rate, review, and subscribe to us via your podcatcher. And please tell your writer, editor, and business friends, basically anyone who writes. You can get in touch with us via the Editing Podcast Facebook page. Drop us your questions in there too, and we promise we'll get back to you.
And don't forget all the links we've mentioned, including Erin's website, in the show notes. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.
Bye!